I still remember the exact sound the words made when they left Jacob's mouth. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it. Calm. Final. Like reading the weather. Grandpa, we don't want you here for Christmas this year. For a second, I honestly thought he was joking. We were sitting in their brand new living room, the one with the wall of windows overlooking the foothills outside Denver. The late afternoon sun hit the glass just right, scattering gold light across the expensive furniture I'd practically paid for. The smell of cinnamon candles filled the air, and the 12-foot Christmas tree stood in the corner, twinkling like a scene straight out of a holiday movie. And in the middle of that picture-perfect scene, my oldest grandson cut me out of it. "What did you just say?" I asked slowly, leaning forward in the leather chair they'd bought with my loan money. Jacob avoided my eyes. He was fidgeting with the sleeve of his sweater like a little boy again, except he wasn't little anymore. He was 30, with a wife who thought Pottery Barn was a personality, and a mortgage that had my name written all over it. "It's complicated," he said. "It's just that Emily's parents are flying in this year. And, well, they have their own traditions." "Traditions?" I repeated, my voice catching somewhere between disbelief and laughter. "I've hosted Christmas for this family since before you were born." Emily, his wife, was perched on the couch, legs crossed, sipping something out of a fancy ceramic mug. She didn't look at me either. She just stared at the fire, lips pressed in that polite, cold smile she always wore when she was about to say something cruel. "My parents prefer a certain atmosphere," she finally added. "Quiet. Sophisticated. You know." No, I didn't know. What I didn't know was that I'd taken out a second mortgage on my house to help Jacob and Emily get this place. That I'd paid for their down payment, refinanced to cover their renovations, and made monthly transfers that could have gone to fixing the leaking roof on my own porch. And now I wasn't the right atmosphere. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. My hands were resting on the armrests, but they'd gone cold. "So where exactly am I supposed to spend Christmas?" I finally asked. Jacob swallowed. "Maybe with Aunt Carol? Or we could celebrate a few days later? Just us?" Like Christmas was some casual dinner that could be rescheduled whenever it fit their calendar. Like decades of memories, of Maria's tamales and carols sung off-key in the living room, meant nothing. I stood up. My knees popped as they straightened, a reminder of the years I'd carried this family. "I see," I said. And I did. I saw everything clearly for the first time in a long while. The designer curtains. The hardwood floors I'd paid to install. The custom kitchen Emily just had to have. All of it built on my sacrifices. "Grandpa, wait," Jacob said, half rising from his chair. But I was already walking toward the door, past the framed family photos where my face had been pushed further and further toward the edges as the years went on. "Tell Emily's parents," I said without looking back. "Merry Christmas." The December air hit me like a slap the moment I stepped outside. My old Ford truck sat in their pristine driveway, like an intruder among luxury SUVs. I climbed in, shut the door, and sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, watching the glow of their house. That house had my fingerprints on every wall, but I wasn't welcome in it. As I drove back through the snow-dusted streets of Denver, the holiday lights blurred past my windshield. Each neighborhood corner held a memory of a man who'd believed family came first, who'd spent everything he had to make sure his grandchildren never had to struggle the way he did. That man was a fool. The numbers started rolling through my head like a cracked calculator. $2,900. Every month. For 5 years. That's what I'd been transferring automatically to their mortgage. I'd added it all up one sleepless night months ago. $174,000. More than Maria and I had saved for our entire retirement. Gone. I pulled into my own driveway. Cracked concrete. Porch light flickering. Roof still waiting to be fixed. Every spare dollar had gone to their picture-perfect life. My phone started buzzing in my pocket. Emily's name. Probably to explain their decision. I let it ring until it went silent. Then I pulled the keys from the ignition and sat in the dark for a while, breathing in the cold air. That was the night something in me shifted. Not in a loud, dramatic way. Quiet. Solid. Like the first layer of ice forming on a lake. I wasn't going to beg to be part of their lives anymore. I wasn't going to keep funding people who treated me like a temporary inconvenience. They thought they'd excluded me from Christmas. They had no idea what they'd actually set in motion. The next morning, the sun broke through the thin layer of snow like nothing had happened. But inside my house, something had. I stood in my kitchen, The same one Maria and I had built ourselves 40 years ago. Faded yellow cabinets. A draft through the window I kept meaning to fix. The smell of strong black coffee filling the air. Normally, this time of year, I'd be making lists for Christmas dinner, thawing turkeys, baking cinnamon rolls for the grandkids. But now nothing. My calendar was empty. And for the first time in years, my bank account didn't have to be. The envelope had been sitting on my desk for months. Thick, cream-colored, with my bank's logo in the corner. I'd kept it there like a loaded gun I didn't want to touch. Inside were all the documents I'd collected, mortgage transfer confirmations, receipts, loan papers. Proof of every dollar that had left my pocket and ended up in Jacob and Emily's world. I spread the papers across the kitchen table like a detective laying out a case file. 5 years of automatic transfers. $2,900 every 15th of the month. A quiet drip, drip, drip of my retirement bleeding away into their forever home. I picked up the phone and dialed the bank. Customer service, this is Megan. How can I help you today? I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I said. My voice was steady. It surprised me. Of course, sir. Can I have your account number? I read the numbers off, one by one. She typed away. All right, I see it. $2,900 to an account ending in 8-1-7-3. Monthly for, well, 5 years. Yes, I said flatly. Would you like to cancel it effective immediately? I looked around my kitchen, the peeling paint on the baseboards, the worn linoleum floor. Every inch told the story of what had been neglected so someone else could live in a house I wasn't even allowed to step into on Christmas Day. Yes, I said. Effective immediately. Done, she replied. The transfer has been canceled. Is there anything else I can help you with? No, I said and hung up. The silence in the room was different now. Clean. Like a weight had slid off my chest. For the first time in 5 years, my next month's budget would actually balance. For the first time since Maria passed, I could breathe without feeling like I owed somebody something. I gathered the papers into a neat stack, carried them into the living room, and stood in front of the fireplace. Maria's photo sat on the mantel, her smile still warm, still steady, even after 8 years. This one's for us, I whispered, struck a match, and dropped it onto the pile. The edges curled, blackened, then burst into a quiet orange glow. 5 years of silent sacrifice went up in smoke. The firelight flickered against the framed photo, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled. By late morning, I'd poured myself a second cup of coffee, a real one, not the cheap blend I'd been buying for years to save pennies. Colombian roast. Strong. It tasted like freedom. That's when my phone rang. Emily. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through. Hi, Tom. Could you do us a huge favor? My parents land at Denver International at 2:30. Could you pick them up? It would mean so much. I actually laughed. A sharp, honest laugh that startled me. Less than 24 hours after telling me I wasn't welcome for Christmas, they were asking me to be their chauffeur. I texted back. Sure, I'll handle it. And I would. Just not the way they expected. By 2:30, I was exactly where I wanted to be. Sitting in my recliner, a fresh cup of Earl Grey steaming on the side table, a crossword puzzle spread across my lap. Outside, the snow had started again, fat flakes drifting lazily past the window. My old flip phone buzzed on the table, but I ignored it. 2:45 buzz. 3:10 buzz. 3:40. Buzz, 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 like a trapped hornet. I didn't answer a single one. Somewhere near baggage claim, Emily's parents were probably tapping their feet, growing redder by the minute, wondering where their ride was. Maybe they'd take a taxi. Maybe they'd wait. Either way, for once, their inconvenience wasn't my problem. By 5 o'clock, I'd made myself a grilled cheese sandwich with real cheddar, not the discount stuff. I dipped it into a hot bowl of tomato soup, watching the snow pile up on the street outside. Somewhere across town, I knew exactly what was happening. 3 angry people were likely standing under fluorescent airport lights, arguing about taxi fares, blaming the old man who didn't jump when they called. For the first time in years, I wasn't at their service. And it felt incredible. At 6:15, the pounding started on my front door. Not a polite knock. A furious, entitled thud, thud, thud. I set my tea down and walked to the door slowly, savoring every step. Through the peephole, I saw exactly what I expected. Emily's father, face flushed from the cold. Her mother with her lips pressed so tight They almost disappeared. Emily herself, mascara smudged, coat wrinkled, fury radiating off her like a furnace. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. "What is wrong with you?" her father bellowed, pushing past me like he owned the place. We waited over 3 hours at that airport. Her mother swept in after him, shaking snow off her designer boots. "This is absolutely barbaric behavior. You embarrassed us." Emily came in last, slamming the door behind her. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes," I said calmly. "I stopped being your errand boy." They all froze. For a second, no one spoke. Then her father jabbed a finger at my chest. "You don't get to talk to me like that, old man. Do you know who I am?" I met his glare, unmoving. "Yes," I said. "You're the guy who waited 3 hours for a ride that was never coming." The silence that followed was delicious. He turned redder. Emily sputtered. Her mother huffed. But I just stood there, hands in my pockets, watching them unravel in my living room. For years, they'd grown comfortable treating me like help, like someone who should be grateful for the privilege of serving them. But those days were over. I stepped back toward the door, held it open, and said softly, "Good night." They stormed out in a flurry of muttered threats and cold air. I locked the door behind them with a quiet click that echoed through the house, like a full stop at the end of a long sentence. 3 mornings later, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my usual mug of coffee, snow still clinging to the edges of my porch, when I saw my own face staring back at me from the front page of the Denver Daily Gazette. I nearly spilled the coffee. The headline read, "Elderly couple stranded at airport during holiday storm. Family member fails to show up." And there it was. A 5-year-old picture of me from my old contracting business website, smiling proudly in front of one of my builds. Underneath, a story that painted me as a cruel, unstable old man who'd left 2 helpless visitors shivering outside Denver International while a dangerous snowstorm bore down on the city. Snowstorm? It had been 35 degrees and lightly flurrying. A storm in Denver terms was whiteout conditions, not holiday sprinkles. The article quoted Emily's parents by name, Harold and Sylvia Morrison, retired philanthropists from Connecticut, who had apparently been abandoned for 4 hours by a relative showing troubling signs of erratic behavior. They told the reporter they had called repeatedly and that I never answered, forcing them to take an expensive taxi ride through dangerous weather. They even threw in a line about worrying about Tom's mental state after recent changes in behavior. No mention of the Christmas ban. No mention of 5 years of mortgage payments. No mention of the chauffeur request less than 24 hours after disinviting me. Just me, the villain. I set the mug down slowly. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. What I felt was cold, focused. For the first time, I saw their strategy clearly. Harold had been a bank executive for decades. He had connections. They didn't just want to humiliate me privately. They wanted to control the story. They'd gone to the press to make sure everyone in their social circle saw me the way they wanted. A bitter, unbalanced man to be pitted and quietly ignored. That was the moment the game changed. They'd drawn first blood publicly. Now, I could respond publicly too. I folded the paper neatly, set it aside, and walked into my office. It used to be Maria's craft room. Now it was my quiet corner. My old laptop hummed to life on the desk. I opened a browser and typed in 3 names. Harold Morrison, Sylvia Morrison, Emily Morrison Wright. Their social media accounts popped up like open doors. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. Decades of curated public lives. Pictures of charity events, dinner parties, vacations to Aspen, Paris, Napa. Quotes about kindness and generosity. Photos tagged in front of the very house I had paid to keep afloat. And then there was Jacob's profile. My grandson. My blood. His LinkedIn activity showed something that made my stomach tighten. He'd connected with Laura Bender, a lifestyle columnist for the Gazette, the same name on the byline of the hit piece about me. So, that's how it happened. They hadn't just told a story. They'd planned it. Harold had the connections, Emily had the narrative, and Jacob had delivered it straight to the press. My own grandson. I leaned back in my chair, the cold Denver lights spilling in through the blinds. For a long time, I told myself Jacob was just influenced by his wife, that he'd find his way back. But that morning, staring at his smiling face on LinkedIn, I understood something different. They weren't just entitled. They were strategic, and they thought I was too old to keep up. I spent the rest of the morning pulling files. Mortgage statements, Down payment receipts. Every transfer confirmation for those 5 years of payments. Even the credit card bills for the kitchen renovation Emily insisted on, and the landscaping project she couldn't host without. By afternoon, I had a binder on my desk thick enough to choke a lawyer. Bank records, signed receipts, copies of checks, every penny I'd poured into their lives, neatly organized and highlighted. Then, I opened a new document and started a timeline. Year 1, $42,000 down payment. Year 2 to 5, $2,900 per month transfers. Kitchen remodel, $19,500. Landscaping, $7,300. Miscellaneous bills covered, $11,000. Total, $237,800. $250,000. Gone. But unlike before, it wasn't forgotten. It was weaponized. They wanted to play chess? Fine. I'd built a business from nothing in a city where the weather and the market could turn on you overnight. I knew how to plan moves 5 steps ahead. And I had something they didn't. Facts. The Gazette article had given me exactly what I needed, the public opening. Now, all I had to do was decide when and how to deliver the truth. The answer came sooner than I expected. That evening, as the sun set behind the Rockies, my neighbor Susan stopped by with a tin of cookies. She was one of those people who'd known Maria and me forever, small-town heart in a growing city. She'd read the Gazette. "Tom," she said gently, "I saw the paper. Are you all right?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine, Susan." "I know those stories don't always tell the whole truth," she said. Her eyes narrowed slightly, especially when certain people have friends in the right places. She wasn't wrong. Harold played golf at one of Denver's oldest country clubs. Sylvia ran charity luncheons. Emily threw parties with half the HOA board in attendance. Their image was everything to them, which meant destroying it in front of their own circle would hit them harder than any court battle ever could. After Susan left, I poured myself a small glass of bourbon and stood at the window, looking out over the neighborhood blanketed in snow. 7 days until Christmas Eve. 7 days to plan something they'd never forget. The following morning was bone cold. The kind of Denver winter morning that makes the world look like it's holding its breath. Frost glazed the edges of my windows, and the heater hummed steadily in the background. I sat at my kitchen table in my robe, staring at the binder I'd built the day before. For years, those numbers had been weights hanging around my neck. Now, they were ammunition. I flipped through the pages slowly. Every mortgage transfer, every renovation invoice, every little moment where I'd said yes to make their lives easier while saying no to my own. A lifetime of quiet sacrifices documented in black and white. Some people fight back with shouting matches or slam doors. I wasn't going to do that. I was going to do what they never expected from old Grandpa Tom. I was going to plan. I cleared the kitchen table, spread everything out like a trial lawyer preparing for court, and started assembling packets. 12 of them. One for each guest I knew they'd invited to their fancy Christmas Eve dinner. Jacob and Emily had been bragging for weeks about the dinner party, Emily especially. "We're hosting 12 this year," she'd said, her eyes shining as if she'd discovered fire. "Harold's colleagues, Sylvia's friends, a few neighbors. It's going to be elegant. Perfect. The bigger the audience, the better." Each packet contained a chronological summary of my financial support, highlighted year by year. Copies of bank statements showing the automatic transfers. Receipts for the down payment, kitchen remodel, landscaping. Screenshots of Emily's social media posts flaunting the upgrades I'd paid for. A printout of the Gazette article with my handwritten notes in red, pointing out every lie and manipulation. On the top page, I wrote in large, neat letters, "The truth about this house." It felt good. Not petty. Not vengeful. Just true. By noon, the packets were stacked neatly in my briefcase. I zipped it shut and rested my hand on top of it for a long moment. For 5 years, I'd carried the burden of keeping their image polished. In 7 days, that image would crack like thin ice. That afternoon, I dressed and drove across town to a little camera shop I used to frequent when Maria was alive. I dusted off my old Nikon from the closet that morning, the one I'd bought to document job sites when I still ran my contracting company. I had the lens cleaned, batteries replaced, memory card wiped. If they wanted to play games in public, I'd be ready to document every moment. Driving back through the snow, Denver looked different. Not hostile, not lonely, just clear. I passed Jacob and Emily's neighborhood, but didn't turn in. The street was lined with SUVs, their house glowing warm behind expensive string lights. For a moment, I thought about all the nights I'd helped them set up those decorations. How Jacob used to sit on my shoulders to put the star on the tree when he was little. Then I remembered his voice. "We don't want you here for Christmas this year." And the nostalgia froze over like everything else outside. That evening, as I made myself a proper dinner for the first time in months, roast chicken, potatoes, green beans, my phone buzzed with a new message. "Jacob, hey Grandpa, can we talk soon? There's been a lot of drama. I just want to clear the air before Christmas." I stared at the screen. 5 years of payments, humiliation, and one public hit piece later. He wanted to clear the air. I didn't reply. Instead, I slid the phone face down on the counter, sat down at the table, and ate slowly. For once, I wasn't rushing to fix anyone's problems. The next few days passed quietly. I went about my routine like nothing was happening. Morning coffee, walk around the block, trips to the hardware store for small projects I'd been putting off. Every evening, though, I'd find myself at the kitchen table, double-checking the packets, making sure the timeline was perfect, adding little notes in the margins. I wasn't just exposing them. I was telling a story. My story. 2 days before Christmas, a light snow fell over Denver. I drove past their house again, more out of habit than anything else. Through their front windows, I saw Emily twirling around in a glittering dress, rehearsing hosting duties. Harold was on the phone, pacing like a general preparing for battle. Sylvia was arranging silverware. They were preparing for a performance, and they had no idea I'd bought front-row tickets. The night before Christmas Eve, I laid out my clothes on the bed. My best navy suit, pressed white shirt, black wool coat, the same outfit I'd worn to Maria's funeral. It wasn't about fashion. It was about showing up like the man I truly was, not the doormat they'd turned me into. I placed the briefcase on the dresser beside the suit and stood back. The sight of it made something tighten in my chest. Not guilt, not fear, just a quiet certainty. They'd underestimated me for too long. Tomorrow night, in front of their entire circle, they'd find out exactly who Grandpa Tom really was. Christmas Eve dawned gray and still. The snow had stopped sometime before sunrise, leaving the streets coated in a soft, untouched layer. Denver looked like one of those postcard towns people romanticize from afar. But for me, the day didn't feel magical. It felt electric, like the hush before a thunderstorm. I'd spent the morning walking through Washington Park, bundled in my wool coat, letting the cold air keep me sharp. My plan had been simmering quietly all week, but that morning it solidified into something tangible. By tonight, their carefully curated world was going to fracture, and I wasn't going to raise my voice once to make it happen. Back at home, I laid the navy suit across the bed again, smoothing down the sleeves like Maria used to. The house was quiet. No grandkids running through the halls. No cinnamon rolls baking. Just me, the ticking wall clock, and the briefcase waiting on the dresser like an old ally. At 5:30 p.m., I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie. My reflection stared back at me. Older, yes, but steady. Not the forgotten grandfather begging for scraps of attention. A man who'd built a life with his hands, raised a family, and was finally drawing a line. I picked up the briefcase. It was heavier than it looked, but it wasn't the weight of paper. It was the weight of truth. By 6:30, I was parked half a block away from Jacob and Emily's house. Their street was lined with expensive cars, SUVs and sedans shining under the porch lights. Laughter spilled faintly from behind their frosted windows. Their house glowed warm, golden, perfect. It almost looked welcoming. Almost. I watched for a moment. Through the big front windows, I could see people moving about the dining room. A long table draped in white linen. Crystal glasses. Silver candelabras. Emily floated from guest to guest like the hostess she'd always dreamed of being. Harold stood at the head of the table, posture stiff with self-importance. Sylvia adjusted the seating cards. Jacob, my grandson, hovered near the entryway, checking his watch. I waited until 6:45 before stepping out of the truck. The air was biting cold. My shoes crunched softly in the fresh snow as I walked up the pathway. The briefcase hung at my side like something inevitable. I reached their front door, turned the knob, and wasn't surprised to find it unlocked. Emily had always loved bragging about how safe their neighborhood was. The sound of conversation drifted toward me as I stepped inside. Someone was telling a story about skiing in Aspen. Another voice chimed in with a laugh that sounded like money. I walked down the hallway, the soft light bouncing off polished floors I'd helped pay for, and paused at the archway to the dining room. 12 faces turned toward me. The effect was instant. It was as if someone had cut the music in a movie. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Forks paused midair. Even Harold, who never looked rattled, stiffened. Emily recovered first. She set down her wine glass slowly, like a stage actress hitting her cue. "Grandpa Tom," she said, her voice dripping with false cheer. "This is unexpected." "I know," I replied evenly, stepping into the room. But I didn't want to miss the big night. Jacob moved toward me, hands half raised like he was trying to manage a crisis. "Grandpa, maybe we can talk later," I said, without breaking stride. I walked to the marble sideboard against the wall, set the briefcase down, and clicked it open. The sound cut through the silence like a gavel. "What's this?" Harold asked, his voice low and annoyed. He hated not being in control. "Just some facts," I said. "I thought it might be nice for everyone to know the real story behind this beautiful dinner." I pulled out the first packet and placed it on the table in front of a middle-aged woman with a string of pearls around her neck. Her expression was polite but curious. Then I moved to the next guest. Then the next. One by one, I laid down 12 identical stacks of paper like cards in a high-stakes game. The guests exchanged confused glances, flipping through pages. "What on earth?" one man muttered, scanning the top sheet. His eyebrows shot up at the highlighted numbers. Emily's mask started to crack. "Grandpa, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I said quietly. "Because this house, this dinner, this entire lifestyle you're showing off tonight, it's built on money you didn't earn." A ripple went through the room. Some guests leaned closer to their packets. Others glanced at Harold and Sylvia, suddenly uncomfortable. The woman in pearls cleared her throat. "Emily, is this saying Tom paid for your down payment?" Emily forced a laugh that came out brittle. "Oh, that was ages ago. He insisted. He wanted to help." I reached into the briefcase again and pulled out the Gazette article. I held it up between two fingers. "And this," I said, "is how they thanked me." Harold's jaw tightened. "Tom, don't start." I laid copies of the article in front of each guest, my red pen notes in the margins glaring under the chandelier light. Lies circled. Facts underlined. Weather report printout attached to the back. "This," I continued evenly, "is the story they planted. My own grandson's connection got this little piece printed 3 days ago. They made me out to be unstable, cruel, an old fool." The man at the end of the table, the one who'd been talking about skiing, squinted at Harold. "You called the paper?" Harold opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Sylvia's hand gripped her wine glass so tightly her knuckles went white. Emily looked like someone had kicked out the legs of the chair she was standing on. "This is ridiculous," she finally spat. "You're ruining Christmas Eve." I met her gaze steadily. "No, I'm just telling the truth. In front of the same kind of people you tried to impress with a lie." The tension in the room thickened. No one was eating anymore. The sound of pages rustling filled the air. Guests whispered to each other, pointing at the highlighted figures. One woman shook her head slowly, muttering something under her breath. Jacob stood frozen, his eyes darting between me and Emily. For the first time, I saw something break in him, the thin layer of denial he'd been hiding behind. And I wasn't even done yet. For a heartbeat, no one moved. 12 pairs of eyes scanned papers, brows furrowed, whispers bouncing back and forth like static. The sound of the wind outside scraped faintly against the windows, making the silence inside feel even tighter. Harold finally rose from his seat at the head of the table. "All right, Tom," he said, voice controlled but eyes flashing. "That's enough. You've made your point. Now, why don't you hand over those ridiculous papers and leave before you embarrass yourself any further?" I didn't move. Embarrass myself? "Harold, these are bank statements. Signed checks. Screenshots. The only thing embarrassing here is how long I let you all walk over me." The woman in pearls spoke up again, louder this time. "This says you covered their mortgage for 5 years, she said, waving one of the statements. "Is that true?" I nodded. "Every 15th of the month. Automatic transfers. I even refinanced my own house to cover their down payment. $237,000 in total. I paid for this house, this dining room, that chandelier you're sitting under." The room shifted. I could see it in their faces, the slow, dawning discomfort of people realizing they'd been dining inside a facade. Emily slammed her hand against the table. "You offered to help us," she snapped, voice cracking under the pressure. "You insisted, and now you're twisting it like some kind of what?" I asked softly. Truth teller. Her cheeks flushed bright red. She looked toward Harold for backup, but for once, he wasn't charging in to save her. He was too busy glaring at the guests, sensing his carefully maintained social standing start to wobble. Sylvia finally spoke, her voice dripping with practiced condescension. "This is a private family matter, and I don't know why you feel the need to involve our friends." "Because you involved them first," I cut in, holding up the Gazette article. "You made it public when you planted this story. You dragged my name through the mud to protect your image. I'm just returning the favor. Except I'm doing it with facts, not fiction." A man in a dark blazer leaned forward, scanning one of the printouts. "Harold, is this true? Did you really call the paper about your own family?" Harold's face turned a dangerous shade of crimson. "This old man is twisting things," he said through clenched teeth. "He's bitter, confused. I took a single step forward, my voice low but steady. "I may be old, Harold, but I am not confused. You built your reputation on connections and appearances. I built mine with my hands, brick by brick. And I've got the receipts to prove every word I've said here tonight." The air in the room snapped like a brittle twig. Guests began openly whispering to each other. One woman leaned over to another, her voice not quite low enough to avoid being heard. "I always wondered how they afforded this place." Emily's head whipped toward her. "Excuse me." The woman raised her hands. "I'm just saying. Things make more sense now." Jacob suddenly stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor, making everyone jump. He stared at me like he didn't quite recognize who he was looking at. "Grandpa, why didn't you say anything before?" "Because I thought you'd figure it out yourself," I said, meeting his eyes. "I thought you'd see what was happening and remember who raised you. But you didn't. You let them turn me into a servant, then into a scapegoat." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked down at the papers in front of him, the transfer amounts, the signatures, the evidence. For the first time, shame started to creep across his face. Sylvia's voice cut through the tension like a dull blade. "This is our dinner. You have no right to storm in here and ruin it. You should be ashamed of yourself." I smiled slightly. Ashamed? No. I was ashamed when I sat in my truck outside this house, knowing I wasn't welcome at the Christmas table I helped pay for. I was ashamed when I saw that article in the paper, realizing my own grandson had stood by while you painted me as unstable. Tonight? No, I'm not ashamed. I'm done. A heavy silence fell. The guests sat frozen, clutching their packets. Some were looking at me with quiet admiration, others at Harold and Sylvia with thinly veiled disgust. One older man at the far end of the table finally broke the silence. "I've been on plenty of boards with you, Harold," he said slowly. "I've seen people play games with image before. But this takes a special kind of nerve." Harold's mouth opened, but whatever defense he'd prepared died on his tongue. The social armor he'd spent decades building was cracking in real time. Emily's eyes filled with tears, not the sincere kind, but the ones that came when her control slipped. "You're destroying us," she whispered, voice trembling. "No," I said softly. "You destroyed yourselves. I just stopped cleaning up the mess." The sound of the wind outside grew louder, rattling the windows. Inside, nobody spoke. Jacob sat down slowly, like the weight of the truth was finally pressing him into the chair. I closed my briefcase, snapping the latches shut with a sharp click that echoed across the room. Then I straightened my tie and took one last look around the table. "These last few years, you made me invisible in this house," I said. "Tonight, you saw me clearly for the first time. That's all I came for." I turned toward the door. Behind me, voices began to rise, not toward me, but toward each other. Questions, accusations, shocked gasps. The carefully constructed social order of that house was unraveling right there on the white tablecloth. As I stepped out into the cold night, the sound of the chaos behind me faded, replaced by the quiet crunch of snow under my shoes. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was walking toward something new. The letter came in early March. Thick envelope. Official seal. Certified mail. I signed for it on the front porch, the air still carrying the sharp bite of late winter. Birds were starting to return, snowbanks shrinking along the driveway. I tore the envelope open right there on the steps, my fingers steady, almost curious. Notice of default. Final demand for payment. 3 months of unpaid mortgage had finally caught up with Jacob and Emily. $8,700 past due. 14 days to bring the account current, or foreclosure proceedings would begin on the house they'd so proudly shown off. The house I had kept afloat for half a decade. I carried the letter inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and poured myself a cup of coffee. No shaking hands, no racing heart, just the quiet satisfaction of watching a storm I didn't have to control anymore finally break. The calls had started a week after Christmas. At first, they came daily, then twice a day, then frantic voicemails at odd hours. Emily's number, Harold's number. Even Sylvia, who had never once called me directly before, left a terse message that sounded more like a demand than a plea. I didn't answer any of them. By mid-February, the calls had slowed. I think that's when they realized the gravy train wasn't just paused, it had derailed. Their carefully curated image had taken a hit after that Christmas Eve dinner. Word spreads quickly in Denver's social circles. Charity luncheons, golf courses, HOA meetings, people talk. I wasn't invited to those conversations, but I didn't need to be. I saw it in subtle signs. Their neighborhood newsletter mentioned the Wrights less and less. Photos of their gatherings stopped appearing online. Emily's Instagram, once a relentless stream of curated perfection, went dark for weeks, then returned with awkward, forced attempts at normal life. Harold and Sylvia, from what I heard through the grapevine, had suffered their own social bruising. Apparently, one of Harold's business associates had been at the dinner that night. The story, the real one, spread through their network faster than their little newspaper stunt ever did. It's hard to maintain an image when everyone's seen the receipts. And Jacob, well, Jacob went quiet. Until one Thursday evening in March, when I heard a hesitant knock on my door. I opened it to find him standing there, shoulders slumped, suit rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. The confident grandson who once told me I wasn't part of their Christmas atmosphere looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 months. "Hey, Grandpa," he said softly. His voice carried a mixture of shame and exhaustion. "Jacob," I replied, stepping aside. "Come in." He hesitated, like crossing the threshold required more courage than he had left. Then he stepped inside, looking around my living room as if he were seeing it for the first time. The fresh paint, the fixed porch light, the new recliner. Small improvements I'd made since canceling the transfers. "Nice place," he muttered. "It's what happens," I said, "when you spend money on yourself instead of people who don't appreciate it." He flinched, but didn't argue. He sat down on the couch, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped. "I need to say some things," he said quietly. "I should have said them a long time ago." I stayed standing. "Go ahead." He took a breath. "I was stupid, blind. I let them, Emily, her parents, convince me that I owed them loyalty over you, that you'd always be there no matter what. I didn't think about the money. I didn't think about what I was doing to you. I just went along with it." I didn't respond, just watched him squirm under the weight of his own words. "And that article," he continued, his voice cracking a little. "I didn't know Harold was going to spin it like that. I thought it'd just be some puff piece, like a holiday story. When I saw it, I wanted to say something. I wanted to call you. But Emily isn't here now," I said evenly. He nodded, eyes cast down. "We're losing the house, Grandpa." "I know," I said simply. "We can't make the payments without." His voice trailed off, but he didn't need to finish. We both knew what he meant. "Without me." I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Do you know how much I gave you over those years?" He nodded miserably. $237,468. Hearing him say it out loud sent a small, sharp chill down my spine. "That's right," I said. "Money I'll never see again. But that's not even the part that hurts, Jacob. It's the years. The trust. The way you stood by while they cut me out like I was some inconvenience." "I know." His voice cracked fully this time. "I lost you, didn't I?" I let the question hang. Then I shook my head slowly. "No, Jacob. You didn't lose me. You gave me away. There's a difference." Tears welled in his eyes. He looked like a little boy again, sitting there with nothing left to hide behind. "Is there any chance you could ever forgive me?" he asked. I walked over to the mantel, where Maria's photo stood next to a new picture, One of me at Easter dinner with my neighbor Rose's family. Real smiles. Real warmth. People who actually wanted me there. I forgave you months ago, I said, still looking at the photo. Forgiveness doesn't mean I forget. And it doesn't mean I'll keep funding your mistakes. He wiped at his eyes, nodding slowly. I don't expect you to bail me out. I needed to say it. I'm sorry. I finally sat down across from him. Then start fixing it. Sell the house. Buy something you can actually afford. Stop living like your life is a performance. And if you want a relationship with me again, you build it. Brick by brick. With respect. He nodded again, this time with a small spark of something I hadn't seen in him for years. Humility. Spring in Denver has a way of sneaking up on you. One week it's gray skies and icy sidewalks. The next, the air smells like fresh soil and the mountains peek through with just a dusting of snow left on their shoulders. By April, the neighborhood looked alive again. Kids on bikes, dogs in sweaters, neighbors tending to early gardens. And for the first time in years, I wasn't watching it all from the sidelines. I'd replaced the cracked front steps in late March, repainted the shutters, even put a swing on the porch like the one Maria and I used to sit on in the evenings. The house didn't feel like a burden anymore. It felt like mine again. Jacob and I talked a few more times after that night. Not long conversations, just short, cautious ones. The foreclosure on their house went through at the end of April. He told me they'd sold most of the furniture to cover legal fees. Emily had moved back to Connecticut with her parents. The last thing I heard, she was posting filtered pictures of beach sunsets with quotes about new beginnings. Jacob, though, he stayed in Denver. Moved into a modest apartment not far from Washington Park. Got a regular job at a construction firm. Nothing fancy, but steady. When he told me, there wasn't pride in his voice, just honesty. And for Jacob, that was new. I didn't rush to rebuild anything between us. I wasn't cruel about it, but I didn't hand him back the keys to my heart either. Trust, once broken that badly, isn't fixed overnight. It has to be earned, brick by brick. I made that clear, and to his credit, he didn't push back. One Sunday afternoon in May, he came by with a box of tools. Thought I'd help fix the back fence, he said awkwardly, like a man relearning a language he once spoke fluently. I handed him a pair of gloves. Good. Bring your own hammer next time. He laughed, genuinely. It was the first real laugh I'd heard from him in years. Meanwhile, Harold and Sylvia faded from the Denver scene like a storm that spent itself out. Their names stopped appearing in event announcements. Invitations dried up. People who build their lives on appearances always forget how fast appearances can turn. One bad night, one truth told in the right room, and the house of cards collapses. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth had done its work, quietly, thoroughly. One evening in June, Rosa, my neighbor from 2 houses down, knocked on my door holding a plate of peach cobbler. Her grandkids were with her, sticky fingers and wide grins. We're having a little get-together tomorrow, she said. Just burgers, music, kids running around. You should come. I hesitated. For years, my holidays and weekends had revolved around their invitations, their schedule. I'd built my world around people who didn't value it. Standing there on my porch, smelling the peach cobbler, I realized I didn't need anyone's permission to belong anymore. I'll bring my famous potato salad, I said. She grinned. That's the spirit, Tom. The next day, as the sun dipped low behind the Rockies, I found myself sitting in a lawn chair under string lights, kids playing tag across the grass, Rosa's family laughing around the grill. I wasn't Grandpa Tom the bank account. I wasn't the man waiting for a call that never came. I was just Tom, neighbor, friend, part of something real. As I watched the kids chase fireflies, I thought back to that snowy night in December. The locked door, the empty truck, the bitterness in my chest. If you'd told me then that I'd feel peace again, I wouldn't have believed you. But peace doesn't arrive with fanfare. It creeps in slowly, through repaired fences, shared meals, quiet mornings without dread. Around 10 o'clock, Jacob showed up. He looked tired but content, wearing paint-stained work jeans. He grabbed a burger, nodded to Rosa, and sat next to me in the folding chair. For a while, neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. You know, he said eventually, I was dreading this summer. Thought I'd be embarrassed to show my face in this neighborhood again. You probably were, I said dryly. Then I looked at him. But embarrassment isn't the worst thing. Sometimes it's the only thing that wakes you up. He nodded, a quiet smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Thanks for not slamming the door on me. I did, I said. You just knocked again. He laughed softly, and for the first time, it didn't feel forced. Later that night, after the kids went home and the lights came down, I sat on my porch with a glass of bourbon. The air was warm, the stars sharp and clear. My house, my life, was quiet, but it was full in a way it hadn't been for years. I thought about Maria, like I often did when the world finally went still. She would have been proud, I think. Not of the revenge itself, she never cared for drama, but of the way I finally stopped letting people write my story for me. I raised the glass toward her photo on the mantel inside. Merry Christmas, a little late, I murmured. Life doesn't give you clean endings. But sometimes, if you're lucky, it gives you clarity. They tried to erase me from their picture-perfect life. Instead, I erased the illusion and found something real waiting underneath.